Hello, coders. Wow, I'm really tall here. Let's bring that down. Hello, coders. Good afternoon. It is episode 212 of the How to Code Well podcast, and it is January the 6th, 2025. It's the first podcast episode of 2025. I hope everybody's had a very festive, Merry Christmas, and they're now all nice and rested and ready and raring and ready for some coding positivity in 2025. We're going to start today by talking about some of the things that are coming up in How to Code Well in the next few months. We're also going to talk about a new course that has been created. We're also going to talk about some new tutorials, a January sale, and then we're going to talk about Symfony and Symfony's killer features. Why I like Symfony so much, Symfony being the PHP framework of my choice. So, before we get started, I just do the obligatory housekeeping. So, this is live. This is a live stream, which means that you may hear noises in the background. There are two English Springer Spaniels, very energetic dogs, so you may hear some barking in the background. If it becomes an issue, I will pause the stream and then sort that out, and then hopefully that won't happen. But if it does, then I'll try and edit things out during the podcast when it goes to the audio form. So this podcast is video as well as audio, and you can pick up the audio version on Spotify. Okay, so before we get into the whole Symfony stuff, I just want to thank we've got a YouTube member, and I just want to say hello. It is, I'm going to butcher this name, Bobuele Jackson. So thank you ever so much for joining the HTCW club. This means that you're able to get tutorials and videos and content before anybody else, and also you support the show. So thank you ever so much. And in terms of the content that is sort of available to you for early access, we've got loads of stuff. We've got 15 weeks worth of tutorials that is available to HTC members, both on the YouTube membership as well as on the Patreons. So we're going to produce one tutorial a week, and they're going to go out every Thursday, and I have enough to take me all the way to the end of April. And actually tomorrow I'm going to start working on the tutorials for May. We've been focusing on Laravel tutorials, and we're focusing on Symfony tutorials this year. So there is a whole bunch of those PHP goodness that is available to the members. And thank you again for supporting the show. We also have a new tutorial, a new course, a new course. If we go over to the browser here, we can see that there is, if I scroll to here, we have a PHP login from scratch course. So this is a course that teaches you how to create a PHP project. It says learn how to create a PHP project which secures web pages using PHP sessions. This course also teaches the test-driven development approach to creating PHP projects. Throughout the course, you will be writing unit tests before writing the project features, testing the code, and then refactoring where needed until the tests pass. You will also learn how to check for PHP code smells using PHP Code Sniffer, and it also has PHP Stan in this course. The course teaches you how to build a means of securing web pages using sessions in PHP, and we do so without the need of any framework. So this is a very beginner-focused, beginner-friendly tutorial, and it's a series of, it's not a tutorial, there's 11 tutorials in this course. So it's a beginner-friendly course teaching you PHP, and it's centering around how to actually set up the project and how to secure web pages using sessions and how to test projects using a continual integration pipeline. So you'll learn how to redirect requests to other pages using PHP header functions. You'll learn how to secure PHP pages using sessions, PHP session management, how to create HTML login forms, how to configure and run PHP code sniffer, and the PHP code beautifier and the fixer to fix project code smells, how to configure and run PHP stan, how to write PHP unit tests using TDD, how to run scripts using Composer to automate repetitive tasks, how to set up a PHP project using Composer. And I've added some required sort of recommended knowledge before you get started with this. So to help you with this course, it is recommended that you have the following skills, experience, and knowledge: an IDE that can read PHP and CSS. So I believe I wrote this in using PHP stan, but you can use VS Code for this as well. Any operating system is good for this course, so Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Make sure that Composer is installed locally. Make sure that there's a PHP Xdebug at version 3 and 3.1 and higher. PHP 8 Plus as well is needed, and have a basic understanding of PHP, HTML, and CSS. Have an experience with creating basic web projects, although this goes in about how to set those things up. And also a basic understanding of the command line, because we're obviously going to be using and running scripts on the command line. But it's a very beginner-friendly, very sort of gentle project that we create, and we talk about how to test. This is a test and it fails, so how do we write a test? How do we write the code to make the test pass? And then how do we refactor? And so there's 11 tutorials in here, and it's been a project that I've been working on for quite a long time, and I'm so glad to get this out. And it's a text-based project, so there's no videos in this course. It is purely reading tutorials. So, for example, I'll click on the project installation lesson because there's the first 3 tutorials are free, so you can have a look at these and see how it goes. So we get the source code. And then it's all about how to go into the course, how to run Composer install, how to test. So something I should say is the course is split into 2 sort of sections. The first one is that you can actually create the project from scratch, to just use that as a reference. And then the other one is how to actually build it yourself. Right, so it's teaching you step by step how to go through the actual build process of the project of the course. So there's like Composer test, and it runs PHP stan, it runs PHP unit, and the code sniffer as well. How to run the local server, and then how to set the project up for learning. So if I go to the next one, project setup and configuration. So this is where I want to create the project from scratch. It goes through, right, this is the structure of the code. This is what we need in the hidden files. So, for example, we got phpunit.cache. We also have the vendor directory and reports. And then we want to keep the reports folder. So we do git keep on that. So this is teaching you how to use git ignore files, and then how to build the configure Composer, how to run Composer, and it goes through each step with this is now what your directory structure looks like, right? And configure PHP unit, run PHP unit. This is what your directory structure now looks like, right? So it's a very gentle way of teaching you how a project starts and builds itself, and starts building upon itself. This is how to configure PHP stan. These are the commands for testing, and so on and so forth. And I think the next one is building the login form. So we build the login form. This is the directory structure you need. This is how we start building the HTML structure. This is the form that we build. Okay, so now let's talk about how to access the site. Now we have something running. Okay, let's talk about how to actually start dealing with PHP form submissions. And so this is grabbing the post requests from the HTTP request, and then check your code at the end of it. So it's a very sort of gentle way, as I mentioned, to build up this project. And of course, we've got 11 tutorials. So building the secure area, then it talks about styling those things, and then the TDD of the login form, and then creating the PHP order configuration, populating the secure area with user data, how to handle sessions with TDD, and how to handle PHP redirects. So that is the new course that's come out. I think it came out about 2 days ago, which I'm very pleased with. I'm very proud of this course. And also, one thing I'm going to mention is that we also have a January sale. So every course on howtocodewell.net is $5, right? So it's very cheap to get these courses. After January, they go back up to their usual prices. And this sales page here shows you all of the courses that are available, and it's also got the first tutorial of each of these courses as well. So do check that out. That is on howtocodewell.net/article January 2025 course sale. I'll leave links to all of this in the documentation in the show notes below. So it's been very busy, as you can imagine. And if we went to the homepage, we have the January course sale as an article. We also have the Is PHP Job Market Dead? That is the last sort of article I wrote of 2024. We also have a new one, which is the development predictions of 2025. So I've got 5 predictions there. Again, I'll leave all of these links in the show notes after the live stream. And then, of course, we have the tutorials. And as I've mentioned, there's going to be one every Thursday, and we have 15 of them scheduled up. So do check those out when they come through. And you can get those tutorials now if you become a Patreon or a YouTube member. Okay, so let's talk about some Symfony, shall we? Symfony is my framework of choice. And a lot of people think that Laravel should be my framework of choice, I think. But actually, Symfony, and I think it's because I've been a Symfony developer pretty much for the most part of my PHP career, to be honest. And I've been a PHP dev for well over 20 odd years, 22, 23, 24 years, something like that. It's been a long time. It's been a long time writing PHP code. And as you can imagine, I've played with all sorts of frameworks, from Cake PHP to Magento to Silas to CodeIgniter to Symfony to Laravel, right? There is one framework that I haven't used, and that is Falcon. And I wouldn't mind playing with that, but I've never seen any kind of need for it at the minute in terms of because I will learn things based on the roles that I want to get, and I've never seen a development job for Falcon. But I have learnt things like Yi, and I've learned things like Cake PHP, and I've even learnt Laravel because of the job roles that were requiring it at the time. I could see that there was a big trend in, say, Cake PHP once, so I learnt Cake PHP and Laravel as well. But I've been a Symfony developer since version 1 of Symfony, and of course we're in Symfony version 7 now. So way back. I remember writing Symfony using Propel. That's the ORM back in the day instead of Doctrine. I remember configuring everything in XML or YAML, and the app_dev.php and the backend_dev.php. That's how we used to deal with our environments. There was no environment variables then. And there certainly wasn't Composer back in the version 1 days. Laravel is something that I've been teaching myself probably in the last sort of 2-3 years. And yeah, it's a great framework, but it's just, it doesn't make me feel gooey inside in the same sense as Symfony. And it's probably because of the time in which I've spent with Symfony. And I've just loved every release that Symfony has pushed out. I think that Symfony is an extremely flexible and extensible PHP framework, and it's certainly made my career go. It's a bet that I'm glad I placed. And actually, when I first started learning Symfony, it was within a web agency, and we were learning or trying out new frameworks to see which framework we should choose. And I believe we were playing with Cake PHP, Symfony, and CodeIgniter at the time. We were just trying to work out which one we should play with. And I'm so glad that we settled on Symfony. And the migration of Symfony 1 to Symfony 2 was so goddamn painful. But once the components started to get introduced, it was a breath of fresh air, really, when basically Symfony got completely and utterly restructured. It was a breath of fresh air. So I know what it was like before the components were being introduced and the pain that went through. And also, back in those days, I was also playing with Zend as well. So, lots of old school frameworks. Some of these frameworks don't even exist anymore, or not in the same way as they did, let's say, back in the day. So yeah, my love for Symfony is partly because of the time in which I've spent for Symfony, but because I've been able to get under the hood, I've found certain areas of Symfony working really well with the various different projects that I've worked on. And I've also found some areas that haven't worked really well. And there's been times where I've been working on projects that aren't Symfony, and I'm like, why can't this be done in Symfony? Because it's so much easier. I have 5 reasons to use Symfony for your next PHP project. And I'm going to be talking about those in just a second. So, disclaimer, I'm a Laravel dev as well. I'm also a Magento dev. I'm a Drupal dev. I'm a WordPress dev. I'm basically anything that you can put PHP to dev. But Symfony for me is where it's at. And I won't shy away at anything that is different, right? In fact, I think if I was to say which one is my overall best framework, it would probably be Slim PHP rather than Symfony, because of the fact that you are in total and utter control over all of your dependencies. Now that comes with it. That's a double-edged sword, because you have to then deal with everything, all the problems that may face. And I think that Symfony strikes the best middle ground. I would say that Laravel is highly opinionated, which in some cases is a good thing, but in others it's can be quite problematic, especially if you're bundled with a bunch of bits and pieces that you'll never use. And I think that Symfony kind of strikes the middle ground really well. So here are my 5 reasons to use Symfony for your next project. The first reason is that Symfony has flexible configuration. Symfony can be configured using XML, YAML, PHP objects, PHP arrays, and PHP attributes. This helps with migrations, as legacy projects may have some configuration in YAML or XML, which allow the process of rebuilding or reusing existing parts of the project easier to accomplish. Now, I need to give you some context here. Most of the stuff that I've worked on in terms of in the quote-unquote professional sense has been migrations, rebuilds, has been moving from platform A to platform B. It has been how to work on existing legacy code, and there's been an awful lot of code archaeology around how has this system got to this state, and trying to introduce, maybe through the strangler pattern, a better way of doing things. And I remember one project quite well, where we definitely used Symfony as a means of bringing a project into the modern era, let's just say. So as configuration can be written in PHP, adapters can also be used to pull settings from external data sources, right? So you could bring settings, I'm not going to use the word configuration, but settings from, say, a database, from an external source, from an API, and then you can configure your application like that. Configuration written PHP also benefits from being IDE friendly and falls within the configuration as code approach. So, and I know that other PHP frameworks use PHP as a means of configuration, but the beauty that Symfony has is the fact that it's not just specific to PHP. We can work through XML if we wanted to, or YAML, and there are various different ways of configuring Symfony through PHP. Excuse me. Okay, the second point is, and I guess the points after this are kind of centered on this point, to be fair. It is the components. Symfony is broken down into a series of components, which means that the overall Symfony framework is very slimline and light. This gives the developer control to install the dependencies they need that are tailored to the project's requirements. You download Symfony, you don't even get the Maker bundle, right? So if you download the skeleton of Symfony, the Maker bundle you have to install yourself, because some projects don't even need it. If you've got a very lightweight project, you probably don't need to make things. If you already know how to make a controller, then there's no point in having the Maker bundle. But if you're making all sorts of different various files, say entities and roots and controllers and all of that gubbins and configuration and bundles and whatnot, then yeah, the Maker bundle makes sense. But you don't have to have the Maker bundle. You don't have to have Twig. You don't have to have Doctrine, right? All of those things are sort of add-ons that you can add to Symfony to make your application as configured and tailored as you want. There are currently 262 Symfony components, I checked earlier, that are written by Symfony developers. These components either make up part of the core feature set or can be installed as add-ons such as Twig and the Maker bundle, as I've mentioned. All right, so you can have a look at these components and you can see which components you want. You can tailor your application to suit your needs better, I think, than other projects that are other frameworks that come at you with bloat. And you're like, well, why have I got all of these packages that I don't need? And that becomes a problem when you have to start upgrading your stuff, right? When you have to start upgrading your stuff, you have to then look at all of the packages that your stuff requires. And if you've got packages that you just don't need, you've never touched, and they become conflicted and they become a bottleneck for you to upgrade your systems, then that becomes a chore, right? Whereas with Symfony, because everything is sort of in components and you don't have to have all of the components for Symfony to work, then you can get away with that, right? You can say, well, actually, I just want these dependencies and I care about these dependencies. And actually, some of these components can be swapped in and out, right? Okay, the third point, and this is a bit of a controversial one, but in my opinion, Symfony is unopinionated. Symfony doesn't force certain coding conventions on you like Laravel or Cake PHP does. And I don't mean to throw any shade in Laravel or Cake PHP's direction at all. It's just they are opinionated, and you could see that as a good thing, right? You could see that as, yeah, okay, it's a massive Swiss Army knife of PHP stuff that I want to have for every project. For me though, when I deal with migrations and rebuilds and upgrades and all of that stuff, I know how problematic that becomes when you're treading through the treacle of bloat, and you're like, well, why am I having to deal with these package conflicts when we're not actually using those packages? So anyway, this gives the developer control to install the dependencies they need that are tailored to the project's requirements for those components. And developers that follow the best practices and standards are that. I'll say that again. So Symfony doesn't force certain coding conventions on you like Laravel or Cake PHP does. This allows developers to follow best practices and standards that are used within the wider PHP community, right? So we're not saying, oh, this is how we're going to do the roots, or this is how we're going to do the controllers, or this is how we're going to do XYZ. We've come to an agreement as PHP developers, as the community of PHP developers, and that is what we're going to do. We're going to follow the community. We're not going to make our own little rules and follow our own little conventions and be on our own, right? This means that we're able to work as one, as a PHP community, And it also means that in terms of hiring, getting other developers on board, it means that, it means that everybody is used to the same thing, right? It's not like, oh, this is Laravel's way of doing it. Well, this is Cake PHP's way of doing it. This is how PHP should be doing it, right? And so if Symfony is following those guidelines, then that's great. The moment it doesn't, and there are cases where it doesn't, the moment it doesn't, that's where I start to dislike it. But there are frameworks, Laravel, for instance, that are more tailored around this is the way we do it, and this is the way we're going to do it, and we're special because nobody else does it like us. And that's fine if that's the way you want to go. But because of my background where I've worked with many frameworks, I prefer to jump from one project to one project knowing that I'm going to be following these Fig standards. I'm going to be following these PSR guides. I'm going to be following, the flow of the PHP community, rather than I'm shoehorning myself into this sort of pigeonhole of Laravel. That's just me. But I'm sure there's Laravel developers who would dislike me saying this, right? That's fine. If that's what they want to do, that's cool. No shade thrown. The number 4 is Twig. Twig is one of the best PHP templating engines out there, in my opinion. It is incredible. And of course, it's optional. You download Symfony, you don't get Twig. If you get the skeleton, you don't get Twig. Because some places don't need it. Some projects don't need it. If you're just creating an API, what's the point in having Twig? You're not going to have any HTML, are you? It's going to be JSON. So you would install that as a separate component. Again, going back to components. So Twig is an optional component that a PHP developer can install and to create flexible templates. Twig can also be extended with custom filters and functions. And as Twig is a component, it can be used in other frameworks and PHP projects such as Slim PHP. Or other things, right? You could be using Twig within WordPress. You could be using Twig within all sorts of other frameworks. It's not just Symfony. And that is something that I really like Symfony. It's like, this is a component that isn't just for our framework, isn't just for our little world. It's also something that everybody can use within the PHP community. And I think it is so empowering from an open source point of view that is fantastic. Excuse me. The last point is, which kind of follows on with that, is that Symfony works well with others. So in my experience, I've worked on Drupal sites that have Symfony. I've worked with Magento sites that have Symfony. I've worked with Yi sites that have Symfony. I've worked with Concrete 5 sites that have Symfony. Okay. Whereas with the Laravel stuff, I've worked with Laravel projects that just have Laravel. There hasn't really been any kind of secondary need of the knowledge of Symfony, because we're not using the Symfony packages, we're using the Laravel stuff, and that's the way we're doing it, and that's the decision made. Whereas some other projects that I've been on, it's been like, we would like you to know Drupal, but we also want you to know Symfony. And we want you to know Magento, but we also want you to know Symfony. And this is so common with Symfony. Symfony is used as a kind of a sidecar for other projects. If you want to create a quick little microservice, then usually, in my experience, it's done with Symfony. And this is where the migrations and the rebuilds and the upgrades come in. It's like, we've got this small little thing, it's Symfony based, can you come on and upgrade it? And also, a lot of the frameworks, Drupal, for example, use Symfony components. And Yi and Concrete 5 use Symfony components. So from a hiring point of view, it is fantastic, because if you can say, hey, I've been a Symfony developer for over 10 years, you're really appealing, because Cake PHP, not Cake PHP, sorry, Concrete 5 and what's the other one? Drupal, right? yeah, okay, so you need that knowledge, but the nugget, the golden nugget here is actually knowing the Symfony components and being aware of what you can do with, say, the HTTP Foundation stuff, knowing what you can do with Twig, knowing what you can do with the Symfony session stuff. So yeah, and if you can say that you've worked on projects that have those components, then you've become more of just a Drupal developer, or you're more than just a Concrete 5, or replace blank with framework developer, right? You become something that is a developer that can actually work in sort of the custom space, if you will. So Symfony components are used in other frameworks and PHP projects. A developer may wish to use the HTTP Foundation component with other frameworks. This is also possible by installing the components as dependencies and writing custom adapters which follow the PHP standards. Often you will see jobs asking for a Drupal developer who has Symfony experience. This has made finding PHP developers easier as the components are shared across multiple frameworks. That is basically the crutch as to why I think Symfony is fantastic, because it is producing these components that are shared across frameworks, and they do it in a way that they're not being a dick about it. They're just saying, like, here's the component and you can use it with Symfony, or you don't have to. That is why I like Slim PHP, because you have control over the packages that you use in your project. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll leave links to resources for things like Twig and the components and Symfony documentation and whatnot. But I would be interested to hear what you guys think. If you're a Symfony dev and you're totally feeling this list and you're let me know. Or if there's anything else, if there's any other killer features that you think Symfony provides that other frameworks don't. Or if you completely and utterly disagree with me, and you think that actually Laravel is the king and will be the king and will always be the king, then that's fine. One thing I will say about Laravel, though, because I do know that there is a lot of Laravel love out there, and yeah, okay, I also like Laravel, not as much as Symfony, but I like Laravel too. Laravel has its own ecosystem. And so with Laravel's ecosystem, everything works well with Laravel, obviously, because it's an ecosystem. Think of it like the Apple ecosystem, where every Apple product works well with other Apple products, and they actually get better the more you're embedded in the ecosystem. So Laravel has its own ecosystem, and if you really want to knuckle down and learn Laravel and become like just a Laravel developer and nothing else, right? So you're not interested in Symfony, you're not interested in Cake PHP, you're not interested in any other frameworks, then I highly recommend you look at the ecosystem and the other things that you can do with Laravel and really start becoming, say, a Laravel consultant. For me, though, that's not really where I want to be. I want to have knowledge of Laravel. I also want to have knowledge of Symfony. For the 5 reasons I've pointed out here today. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. And before I go, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to support the show, then please go over to go to patreon.com/howtocodewell, become a Patreon member, or join the YouTube membership. There are 15 tutorials available to you all the way from now, Thursday, this Thursday, all the way to the end of April. I'll be releasing a tutorial, and you can get those as early access from the membership and from Patreons as well. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. I'll see you next Monday at 5:30. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.